Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host.
She can't stop eating the local Vietnamese beef noodle soup. It's so good.
Leanne Hughes.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Leanne Hughes, and I'm here to help you create unpredictable workshop experiences that predictably work. Last week on the show, we had Wade Brill. She's a mindfulness coach, and she was sharing her ideas on how we can get more centered when we bounce into all these Zoom meetings or MS Teams or whatever platform you're using. But I'm certainly hanging up from one call, I'm clicking the link to go to another call, and I'm not really having a break. I'm bringing all those sort of issues, concerns, opportunities from a previous call into that new call. And she shares her ideas on how we can sort of arrive at those meetings feeling more centered and more focused, which also helps us become a better listener, better facilitator, and more present as well. This week, I'm bringing on a guest who really tunes into what people want. And you may think that's a superpower of his, like how does he know what industry wants or companies or people? He's figured out a really neat system on how to do this. So this is really important if you're thinking about what kind of workshop you can run, how you can market opportunities for your business, how you can fill out your webinars. He has a strategy to do that. His name is Ken Burgin, and if you're a member of the Flip Chart, you'll definitely know the name, but you might not know the story. In fact, I learned a ton about Ken and how thoughtful he is in this conversation. Ken Burgin is based in Sydney, and he works with food service operators to assist them to be more popular and successful. He is a former cafe and restaurant owner in Sydney and started the online management platform Profitable Hospitality. He now works for hospitality finance company SilverChef, focused on educational content and events for business owners. Ken has many years of experience providing training and content to help transform the hospitality industry. He likes finding out the why of business success and the why not of business problems, keeping track of the latest technology and presentation techniques, and updating his photography skills. In this conversation, we flip between talking about the virtual facilitation side of things, so how to run an engaging webinar, versus how do we get people to our webinars in the first place? And really, it's all about providing value to the people that we serve. This might sound obvious, but Ken provides some really specific strategies on how he grew his business and ended up selling out a lot of his weekend workshops. He also shares how he connects with people and how he uses systems to keep himself industry current. Now, if you are on the Flip Chart, you'll know that you hop on there and through the week, Ken will post these articles and insights that you've never seen before. And you're like, how does he find this stuff? Where does he get the time to do it? And I love that he shares this and he makes it sound very accessible for all of us to do. When COVID hit back in the beginning of February, Ken was the first person I hopped on a Zoom call with to talk through, to test things out like virtual backgrounds. And he showed me all the cool signs he used to use in his webinars. And I love that he has this mindset of just trying things out and giving it a go. If you enjoy this episode, reach out to Ken. You can find him at Ken Burgin, KenBurgin.com.au. Add him on LinkedIn, follow him on Instagram, all of the networks. You can even chat to him on our free Facebook group called The Flip Chart. And a link to all of that, plus Ken's contact details, is over in the show notes for this one at firsttimefacilitator.com/episode 135. Now, onto the show. I am super excited to welcome today's guest onto the show, Ken Burgin, down in Sydney. Ken, how are you?
I'm really excited about this, honoured and excited. Great to be here, yeah.
I'm excited too. I mean, we've chatted a few times. We have actually done a video recording before for the Flip Chart. We've messaged, and every time you say something, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that about you. So I'm really keen to explore more of your story. It's I didn't know that.
Man.
Yeah, mystery man. So tell us more. I guess interestingly enough, you're doing a lot of virtual work now, workshops, but you've got a really interesting career background. Can you share that with our listeners?
Yeah, well, in a previous life, I think we've all had a few lives, haven't we? Previous life, I trained as a social worker in child welfare, which was kind of interesting and a bit scary at times, but I really enjoyed that. But always had a dream of having my own cafe, and then living in Glebe in a suburb of Sydney where there's lots of cafes, and one was for sale. And I didn't know about how do you buy a business or anything like that, but I learned pretty quickly, and you get the money organised, you get a lawyer involved and all the rest. So had a cafe and then a restaurant for 10 years, really enjoyed that. And it was pretty successful with those businesses and got to a point at the end of 10 years, my brain, I loved the work, money was good, but my brain wasn't getting enough stimulation. But one of the things that kept me kind of interested during that time was staff training, actually. And that was, I had a couple of staff who really enjoyed delivering that too as well. So it wasn't just me, because I try to kind of delegate that kind of stuff if possible, especially if it's just like frontline training with, new waiters or chefs or something like that. But it just intrigued me, and just the assumptions that we make about how people learn and what they need to know. And it's usually not very true. I'll never forget, I love numbers and I'm big on numbers and teaching numeracy as part of business education, because a lot of people actually are pretty hopeless at numbers. We've all found ways to disguise that. And I never forget having a bunch of chefs who I wanted to teach about food costing, which is, that you don't make money unless you get your food costing right in hospitality. And so I got little calculators for everyone. There was about 5 of them. We were standing around the bench in the kitchen, and we had a big strip of sirloin steak that comes in about 4.5 kilos. And for that to be served on the plate, it has to be open, and it has to be trimmed, and, then you cut it up into 10 or 11 portions. So whatever you buy that steak for, it's going to be, there's going to be waste and all sorts of interesting things with calculators, with calculations to work out. So I said, let's do this. And we got into it. And then I said, now grab the calculator and let's see how we go. And not one person knew how to use a calculator. See, so my assumption was just completely wrong. So I learned a lot.
Yeah, I've actually had a situation before using an app, and I thought, gosh, it's going to be so easy. And then there was things like language barriers and all sorts of things that didn't anticipate. It wasn't even on the radar. Yeah.
And so when and after I'd sold my business, and I kind of invented a course, which we'll talk a bit about inventing courses, which is called Starting a Cafe or Restaurant in Sydney. And I ran that for, about 15 years. It was a full day, Saturday. I loved delivering that. I think I saved so many houses, so many people, because my aim in that course was that people learn a lot and then decide not to do it, because most people shouldn't go into it's a very hard business, very risky, and a lot of the dreamers and schemers who came along had stars in their eyes. It was a bad decision, but one of the way I persuaded them ultimately, and it wasn't my job to say yes or no to them, but was to give them some facts around numbers. And again, I knew most people, at least half the room, probably didn't really know how to use a calculator on their phone, for instance, because I saw a stat years ago that said that 47 out of 100 people can't do a percentage. Okay, so that's really stuck in my mind. I keep trying to find the source of that, I can't, but it's stuck in my mind. And so we'd sort of wrap up the workshop. We'd have a great day talking about marketing and concepts and menu and all the exciting stuff and employing staff. Then we'd do the numbers. And that's when people would go all a bit silent, because they realised it just wasn't easy money. And, you've had that experience yourself, I'm sure, where people do the work themselves, come to the realisation. Your job's not there to say, bad decision, don't do this, don't do that, because people don't believe, they don't believe they're going to be unsuccessful. They've got to convince themselves.
And I think we all have that, particularly when you look at owning a restaurant or cafe. You're like, if I do it, I'd think, it's going to be so much fun. I'll just be like drinking at the bar and like enjoying my coffees and conversations. Like I see that side of it. I don't see like the early mornings, the balance sheets, all of that. And it's funny, there's a few restaurants just down at a shopping centre down the road, and like every 3 or 4 months, it seems like there's another new store in there. Yeah,
a little human, not a tragedy, but some sad stories behind that turnover as well. That's what. And when you've delivered pretty much the same workshop for years and years, you really do learn the script. You learn the one-liners, the zingers. And, what I love the most is getting everyone talking and asking questions and sharing ideas and all that. So translating from that joy of doing live events to online. That's kind of a bit of a challenge we've got to talk about.
Let's talk about that, because Ken, you've been running, I've seen you really become very active in this space since COVID hit in terms of supporting your industry, hospitality, and particularly, cafe and restaurants that are really feeling the pinch. So some things that you've been doing, I've noticed your webinars, your content. It seems like you've always got the latest stats and articles that you're sharing. Mm-hmm. So let's first explore the webinars. How did you build up your skills quickly to deliver these for the state?
Yeah, well, I've been doing them for quite a few years, actually. I've had a photo recently of about 9 years ago. It was when GoToWebinar was kind of the only one. Still as expensive as it was then, but and I remember the first one. One of my brothers, who's very good at marketing, he was staying with me at the time. He was my kind of technical director, and it was, like you all do the first times, take a deep breath. And we had like 350 people, and it was on this really cutting edge topic. Then you know what it was? Online marketing. Oh my God. It's hilarious, isn't it? And I look at the slide of styles, the style of slides I did there. It's just, anyway, you learn, you practice.
Comic Sans, bold italics.
All that, no Comic Sans, but lots of darkness. So I've been kind of running those. You just get better at it. And I guess for facilitators also, just between us, it's actually not as hard as other people think, is it? I remember someone explaining that to me. Don't tell them that it's too easy. It's not like it's easy, but people think it's, incredibly difficult and complicated, and not so much, especially once you've, repeated it a few times or half a dozen times. You just get better at that. But it's a way of reaching out to people. And over time, just kind of, I've learned to be more interactive. And there's a lot more tools now for people, having chat and Q&A and getting people responding and those sorts of things. So, really enjoy that. But I'd always go back to live events. That was my preference. That's what I liked the most. But when I had a membership website, which was my main business for quite a few years, we'd have webinars as kind of part of the paid membership benefits, and have the recording of them available for people afterwards, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so you've been doing this for some time, and whereas it's getting bigger and bigger now, this whole membership model with paid webinars and all sorts of things. And I remember when COVID first hit, we jumped on a call and you were showing me some really cool tools within Zoom, and you had these printed signs, so you were mixing the physical world and the digital world.
Yeah, isn't it funny? We think of, here we are, I'll show you. This was one of those ones.
For those listening, it says, he's holding up a sign which says, "I think you are muted."
I mean, it's funny, isn't it? And now, of course, when I ask people, can I like to be a guest on a webinar? And I said, it's just like a Zoom call. Oh, no problem. Easy. Everyone's ready to do it because they know what a Zoom call is. They've all done it. Whereas, again, there was another layer of kind of calming people down. It's not complicated, it's, And, so that's nice. That makes it easier.
Definitely.
For people who want to offer webinars.
So how do you keep your things, I mean, if you've got the same sort of audience coming into your calls every week or fortnight or however often you run it, do you feel a certain pressure on yourself to keep things fresh or like to mix things up?
You need to. So I have at the minute with SilverChef, the company I work for, every 2 weeks I run a webinar and I alternate. One is called Smart Operator Roundtable, and there's one of those coming up this week. So basically that's 3 or 4. I've got like 4 cafe and restaurant owners who are going to come on as my guests. It's just like, how do you do what you do? How are you handling this year? What are some of the things? And I find people who, from their record, and I've talked to them before, that they've got some achievements, but people really love to hear what didn't work and how we fixed it, because that's human then. It's pretty boring when we hear presentations that everything's triumphant and just like this march into the future. That's not life, So I'll always each one's called the Smart Operator Roundtable, but the guests, the characters in the performance are changing each time. And then the alternate one every fortnight is a more topical one. So the previous one we did was about buying and selling cafes and restaurants, because amazingly in this topsy-turvy world at the minute, the demand in Australia for people to buy cafes is soaring. There's a huge demand.
Really?
Yeah. Lots of people who've lost jobs or want to change careers or want an opportunity, because suburban cafes with a simple operation doing lots of takeaway are doing really well. So I thought, okay, and that's where I tune in. What's happening in the industry? Let's see if we can design a webinar around that topic. So with something like that, again, then I'm now, time-wise, it was like me being as the source of all wisdom and have your deck of 30 slides and go through and preach. And there's still value sometimes in that approach. But this time I had a business broker and a lawyer and a bookkeeper on, and someone else who's a consultant in the area. So again, it was the panel style, coming back to that. And, I've loved panels for ages. I had sitting through badly run panels.
So what does a badly run panel look like for you?
A badly run panel, first of all, is they ask everyone to answer the same question.
Yeah.
And it's just, please, and they're boring questions. They don't challenge anyone. And, well, a good panel is, we might just ask different people different questions, but we also challenge the panellists if they give a bit of a cliche answer or, just something that's not digging deep. Our job as facilitators is to dig deep, to find out the why did it happen that way? How did you fix that problem? No, tell us exactly. Who did you have to sack? Not, we hired a really great team. Yeah, but you had a team before. What happened to the old one?
Oh, love those questions.
We've got to dig deep, because that, and I remember once doing this, it was around event management, having a panel, and this woman came up to me afterwards and said, "You asked all the questions that I wanted to ask." And I was really flattered by that. And that's our job, really, is to get in the mind of our audience, because most of them are not going to put their hand up. Although you're saying, any questions, most people don't ask questions. They'll sit and listen. So the more we can channel them, really, with the juicy questions, the better, I think.
Yeah, and you've talked about that a couple of times. So tuning in the context of being a facilitator on a panel, but you also talked about tuning in terms of what's the relevant topic at the moment in terms of your webinar, and the fact that people are buying suburban cafes. So how do you tune in to what's going on in your industry?
Well, I think there's actually a couple of kind of top themes that for my industry, but lots of industries, will always get people leaning forward. And one is cost cutting, cost control, bad staff, issues with inadequate or badly performing staff. I mean, they're kind of universal issues that are hard ones to deal with. So if we dive straight into that, like I'm planning the webinar after next, the topic one is going to be just called cost cutting. And I'm going to get some smart operators who I know the software they use or the way they hire people or the way they do their supply procurement, all those sorts of things. But I know, and I've known for ages, whenever I use the word cost control or cost cutting, everyone leans forward. I want to know that. And interestingly, because in business, there's two ways to increase your bottom line. One is cut costs, the other is grow sales. But if I said how to grow sales, to make more money, I'll get half the audience than I would if I do a cost cutting. It's like, I'd much rather talk positive, but does that resonate?
Yeah, no, but I did the same thing with the webinar. I was like, how to create an engaging presentation versus how to create a non-boring workshop experience. And everyone signed up for non-boring.
Yeah, that's right. Because we've all been in one and we all dread the thought that we might offer one. We might bore people. Yeah. So the language is, so I guess coming back to, how do I keep up with themes and things like that? I know those are things to kind of deal with, a topical thing. I was actually, when I was preparing, thinking back in history a little bit, when Australia had the GST, Goods and Services Tax, introduced 10%. So I was running a cost control workshop for restaurants through the Restaurant Association, and it was going pretty well. So, hang on, just change the name. GST and cost control doubled the number of people coming along. And all I did was add half an hour on, what GST means and what the admin's going to look like. But again, just kind of Be sharp on what are the pain points in your industry. I mean, old sales technique, isn't it? If you've got a bruise, go and hit that arm and say, oh, it must really hurt, doesn't it? Now I've got just the thing to make you feel better.
Yeah, well, they often say when you're in your marketing, like, you've got to state the problem. Don't assume that they know what the problem is. And if you can, Zig Ziglar, I think we had this chat before, if you can define the problem the way that your customer defines it, they think you've already got a solution.
Yes.
I paraphrased him.
Yeah. So I guess keeping up with my industry. So I'm kind of like in one vertical, whereas I know a lot of facilitators, you sort of need to be across a few different ones, but I guess I've got all my kind of sources of information. LinkedIn's pretty useful, especially I've built up a big kind of connection list, but I'm pretty ruthless about who I accept or who I ask. I only want to talk to people in Australia who are in my industry, basically. So then I know some people who've got incredible, connection lists, but they kind of, it's all over the world and all over the shop and all over different topics. So that can be useful. But I think the biggest source of information for me in something that I've built up over years and years is my list of blogs that I follow through a blog reader. Most of us have probably got a few different blogs that we like looking at, but if you have a blog reader like Feedly is one, maybe we'll put the link in that. That's a good one.
Cool. So I'll put Feedly in the show notes.
Yeah. So see, people worry about if you subscribe to lots of blogs, oh my God, I'm going to be completely overwhelmed. No, most people, they might write a blog entry once a month or something like that. But, I've probably got more than 500 blogs in that I follow. But that means every day when I check the blog reader, there might be 50 or 60 entries. But what I'm seeing is just a little 3 or 4 line summary of it. It's like the headline of the blog post plus the first 3 or 4 sentences. So I'm just on my iPad. It's the first thing I do in the morning after breakfast. I just flick through on my blog list, anything that catches my eye from the headline or the topic, and then that will only be, maybe 1 in 10 or less than that. I'll open it up, have a read. I might then tweet it because I use Twitter a lot. I like to share information, or I might occasionally send it on to someone who I know might be interested, or I'll email it to myself because I might want to put it in my newsletter or something like that. So when you see a blog, and this is where you set your browser up properly, whether it's on your iPad or Chrome I use on my computer, you can have a little extension in there, a Feedly extension. So you see a blog and say, oh, they do interesting stuff here. Click on that and it's added to your Feedly list. So every time they write a new blog post, it's going to pop up in Feedly as you're scrolling through. Okay.
That's awesome. Yeah, such a great way to create content.
Yeah, because
creating it. Yeah.
Another way, you think, I'll get on their their newsletter list and all that. And I don't mind that, but usually I prefer this way for me to kind of harvest information. And then you can spread, especially the fact you don't have to read everything. All you're doing is just skimming through, seeing if something looks of interest. Then you can gulp through lots of information this way without being overwhelmed. So blogs, I'd say, is number one for keeping up with information. I really like Twitter as a source of information. And Twitter I use, I guess it's not just industry information, but I also use it for, like I follow European politics, I follow a few historical subjects. I mean, Twitter's amazing. You use Twitter, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Not as well as you. I literally just retweet Alan Weiss every day.
Okay. Yeah, I've noticed that. But Twitters can be, again, another source of information where you can just skim through quickly. And if someone's being too relentless or retweeting too much, I just stop following them. Be pretty ruthless about that. So it's blogs, Twitter, a few newsletters, LinkedIn, I find good sources of information because I know that my audience, restaurant owners, cafe owners, other industry people, mostly they don't get to read this. Too busy, just don't have the time, but they do like to be given selected information. So there's a role for me as curator, as the person who finds the good stuff for you, the relevant stuff, cut through the noise, etc.
Yeah, Ken the curator, love it.
Yeah, KK, there you go.
Casey.
I mean, an example would be most of the management writing in hospitality is American sources. Now, sometimes it's relevant, a lot of times it's not, because the industry is a different scale, different cost drivers, completely different, but there is some extremely good stuff comes out of the US. So that's where I'll kind of sift through stuff and share the...
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good strategy. A lot of people, when they think about, I've got to become an expert and like be a thought leader, they think that it's all about them generating new ideas constantly. And what I love about your approach is that it's like, hang on, we've got the internet, the World Wide Web is here with all this amazing content being generated. You stand out, Ken, because every time I hop onto LinkedIn or even the Flipchart Facebook group, you're sharing this new article that I've never seen before. And it's like, and that makes your profile just go,
where did you find that?
Yeah.
People say to me, where did you find that?
Where did you find it? So I want to talk to you more, Ken, about business, because you ran a profitable cafe. Now you're helping out hospitality business owners. So any service-based industry, there's a few key elements, right? Like you said, it's cutting costs, growing sales. We've got a lot of facilitators listening. A lot of people recently during COVID have actually gone, you know what? I don't want to work for my company anymore. I want to do my own thing. What are your tips for growing a business, for growing revenue?
So thinking back to when I sold my cafe and restaurant, I always thought I want to be a consultant. And that lasted about 6 months because I found in consulting, people don't do what you suggest. They don't listen, you know.
Very true.
Or when they want your help is when they're losing money and they can't afford to pay you. So that doesn't really work. But also, I mean, again, I love the group thing. I love the group stuff. So what I found really worked well was working with industry associations. So like in my industry, it's the Restaurant Association or Club Managers Association, Hotels Association, things like that, and going to them and offering to run workshops for them or find, because industry associations are kind of well-respected, usually under-resourced, scratching for money, but they really want to provide services for their members beyond just, you know, representation to government and things like that. So the Restaurant Association, I'll never forget my first restaurant marketing day. My God, I took weeks to prepare for that. It was we all remember those first ones, don't we? Anyway, the second one's always much better. But I kind of I think I mentioned, you know, it was called Kitchen Cost Control Workshop. And again, the magic words, cost control. And we got a really good response to that. And I made so the association would make money. They would also be seen to be the good guys because they were offering something of good value for their members who could pay a reduced price to do it. And I would generally work on a per head fee basis. Sometimes it would be just a fee, but I always made sure that they made plenty of money from that. So then I branched out into the area of clubs like social and sporting clubs, which again, hospitality, different rhythms, different type of people, different cost structures. But in Australia, very active with training. Training is a very important part for managers in those areas. So I came up with, you know, what are you doing around the catering side, the food side, the event side, and all those sorts of things. Oh, nothing. What do you suggest? Well, how about I put something together? And that was enormously successful for years and years and years. Really loved doing that, travelled with that. You get to know the rhythms, the questions, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, nice. Reaching out to industry associations, offering your value to their members.
And I give them options, you know, what about this or that, or what do people want? And sometimes they know, sometimes they don't even know. You've got to talk to the decision makers too, find out who they are. So that's, you know, the old networking thing. And these days, LinkedIn gives you lots more kind of access to people, decision makers like that as well.
So I'm just curious, in your first reach out, would you have an existing relationship or how would you approach them for the first time? Would it be like, hey, I'm Ken and like, I can do this for you? Or,
So with the Restaurant Association, as a restaurant owner, I'd always been a member. So that gave me, I kind of knew who the people were. With the Club Association, I didn't really, but I had a recommendation from someone else who knew the work I was doing. Said, oh, you should go and have a talk to this training manager. And we had a chat and he said, yeah, let's have a go. Let's see if it'll fly. And it blew up. It didn't just fly. It, went crazy.
Wow, that's so cool.
That was, that was exciting. And I was humble enough to, keep learning and keep asking lots of questions because, it's a good question because if you want to get into, sometimes it's industry associations, other time it might be companies, and I guess that's where it's who's going to listen, who's receptive to this. For you, have you had that experience of cold calling in a sense with any companies?
Do you know what? It's I haven't had to, which is very lucky to say that. But sort of when I first left, I've had lots of contracts that have just been for a set period of time. So and then I've always sort of looked ahead and then thought, oh, what do I need to do now? And then I've sort of supplemented that by sort of online offerings as well, just to people in this community, community, balance out with corporate clients. I know after talking to Alan Weiss, I keep quoting him every single day now since that interview, but he talks about then referral business. So let's just say you get a corporate client, and that's what I've been doing as well, trying to get testimonials and going back to them and going, hey, could you refer me? Do you know anyone that would need this? And it's not as cold as...
and look, even within a company, like I sold my business and now I work for a large company, and I guess I'm trying to be entrepreneurial within it as well. So every company has an intranet, and I saw, there's a blog. You can write blogs here. And no one was writing it. And I thought, I've got onto IT. Can you give me blog access? Yeah, sure, no problem. So, every 2 or 3 weeks I write a blog article. So that just... no one else does it, but it's all short and sweet.
So cool.
And I just kind of reach out to different sales teams. Like at the beginning of the year, do you guys know how to use Zoom? No, can you use it? Well, how about we have a Zoom call and I'll show you all and we'll swap like you've done, we'll swap admin and we'll have a play together. Oh, that'd be awesome, Ken. Will you do that? So we do that. Or another time last year, I was just interviewing sales people I knew who were really sharp sales. But how do you do what you do? I just put my iPhone on a tripod and go into a quiet room when I saw them and just interview it and just put them up internally, 5 minutes. All that sort of stuff. Just do it,
Just do it. Yeah. And I think this question, I'm going to throw the question to you because you're very visible. You write these blogs, you do all these webinars. It seems like you're always available to do things like podcast interviews. You're posting on the flip chart. You're doing all the stuff. But how do you manage your time when do you actually work?
Goodness.
When do you actually work?
when do you do your real work? Yeah. I'm a bit of an early bird, so I like to go for an early morning walk about 6:30 or something like that. But that's kind of podcast listening time as well. I guess I'm a little bit of not too much of a 7-day-a-weeker. When I had my own business, I didn't really know too many boundaries around days of the week. Yeah. But early morning, evening. But yeah, I have to say time management is not something you should quiz me on too closely.
Yeah, I'm not an expert either. It's funny. So when I just for those listening in, I actually wrote the question, I prepped guests before the show and I wrote them down. It was like Friday, 8:30 p.m. And I'm like, I'm not going to send this now because I look like a bit of a loser on a Friday writing this out. So in Gmail, you can schedule send. So I sent for 8 a.m. the following day. But Ken was he was asking me Saturday morning. So we're both just messaging on the weekend.
Who cares?
Who cares? Yeah, that's it. I think it's just go with the energy. And when I get the focus, it doesn't matter what time of the day it is or week, I'll just run with it. There's times when I'm certainly slack. So, so in terms of your workshops, you spoke about that marketing on the first one where you were a bit nervous. You spent weeks preparing for it. Are you finding there's a real difference in terms of your personal preparation for jumping on these webinars? Are you very relaxed now? You run them for 9 years?
Yeah, I'm more relaxed, although this is sort of webinar week. I've got one on Thursday and it's Monday we're talking. Just a little bit of nerves around it, a little bit of stage nerves, which is probably not a bad thing to do. I don't want to feel like I'm too... It's really because I've got 4 new faces and none of them have ever done this before. I've spoken to them all. They're all ready to go. But the outcome I want is lots of chit-chat. I want the chat to be lively. I want the Q&As to flow. And that's the thing that I find the hardest sometimes to get that. I know when we've had topics, for instance, when the COVID crisis blew up and we did some topics on lease negotiations and really urgent topics, then we'd have 40 to 50 questions and having to handle it. That was exciting.
How did you handle that?
Well, I had a team, a colleague of mine I work with, and we set up the questions. We do it on a Google sheet, so she's kind of curating them and finding them. I'm putting them on the sheet and I'm reading them out to the relevant lawyer or broker or whoever we were talking to. But we got through it all. But that was the importance of having a helper too, I think, which I've always tried to do. So I guess I've got a sort of set of slides. The less it's involving, me giving all the content, the easier it is. So for this one this week, I've got headshots of everyone. I'll just I'll introduce them briefly. I don't sort of read out a big intro about them. I do screenshots of their website and their social media as just kind of what they're doing. Yeah. And then let's have a conversation. Mm-hmm. So I've tried to simplify that as much as possible. So my rhythm is just sort of promoting it. I use Eventbrite for the bookings. And as I've built up the webinars over the last 6 months, I've been using Eventbrite for a long time. I built up a really solid list, a very big list of several thousand people who've attended. So that means I can promote to all of them about future events, which is a very powerful way to do it. So then they sign up in Eventbrite. We deliver in Zoom, and I use Zapier as the kind of connection. So the Eventbrite registration automatically triggers a Zoom registration. So there's only one thing people need to do: give us their details once, they're signed up, and then there's the reminder systems, that both those services have for the day before and the hour before, and all those sorts of things. And still, you only get 30 to 40% of sign-ups turning up, don't you? That's just...
Yeah, and that's actually quite high. I remember when COVID first hit, though, like the amount of people attending webinars, like myself, I was booked onto 6 to 8 every week because of what else am I going to do? And how do we navigate this uncertainty? And I remember the show-up rate was around 60, 70%. It was super high in the first month or so. Yeah. Now I think it's we've got that whole fatigue factor setting in.
Yeah. So then the day after, I'll send out a link to the replay and links to anything that we've talked about and those sorts of things. Nice. You can't automate it completely, but trying to have a system that's easy to reproduce each time.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you have any other tips for our listeners who want to get more involved in either webinars, or you could take the other approach and go, is there another tip that you have for someone for growing their business that you think, I just can't read this without sharing it?
Yeah, well, I think people are keen to write blogs and all those sort of things, and oftentimes it's just oh my God, when I got time to, feeling like it's going to be this huge, important, earth-shattering piece of content. Well, I've got, I use a note-taking app, and I've got probably a dozen articles on the go at any one time. If I get a brainwave or I read something, I think, I could do something like that. So I'll just sort of start tapping out bullet points on that. But also, I wrote stuff. I've been writing stuff for ages. Sometimes you look at old stuff and you think, there's some kernels there. There's some kind of ideas at the centre of that just can be rewritten, updated. I found one the other day, which was talking about the importance of using Facebook, which has 500 million people or something using it. It's 5 times that or something like that. Yeah. But obviously that's the sort of thing you update. But the other thing is your blog is your kind of content and part of your credibility, even if it's once a month you do something. But I've been, in the last few months, I've always done newsletters previously. I don't do one for business now, but I've always wanted to do one personally. I've started using a system called Substack, which is you can basically write a newsletter page, very easy to set up and edit and add links and add pictures, and then you can click send and send it out as a newsletter. And you can also monetize it if you want to. So I've got the option of, it's free every week, but back issues I've set up. If you want to look at all the back issues, there's a small monthly or annual fee, and they set up the billing on that. You pay them 10%, which is worth it. Otherwise, it's completely free. And I find it super easy to kind of edit, and a lot of the content I put in there, guess what? It's just my curation. It's the 10 or 12 really interesting things I found this week. That's what I put in there. And I've always had a YouTube video, because you can embed a YouTube video, which might be a funny one or it might be a serious one, and a few pictures, and I enjoy that.
It's a nice way to document your life as well and your journey. And a lot of my favourite newsletters, Michael Bungay-Stania, Near Ale, they also have a little snippet about what's going on. They've got fun videos, links to great articles, and it's curated by them. And it's usually really interesting, right? Because they're cutting out that 90% of stuff that just isn't relevant for their audience. Oh, these tools are great. How do you find out about all these tools? Substack, you talked about Zapier. I mean, you like your systems? Yeah,
I guess it's through all those blogs that I follow. It's, seriously, probably occasionally you see, or you'll see a newsletter that you like and say, what's the system they use? And that's how I noticed Substack, and I'm noticing quite a few people use it. It's good.
Awesome. I'm going to have to check it out. All right. Any tips for first-time facilitators that are listening in that want to get better at their webinar game? What advice would you have for them? I know you've been doing this for so many years, for decades, staff training, social work.
Getting better at their webinar game. I think just start, maybe you just invent a few things, but think of those kind of like the pain point, topics around pain points, topics around, great team building. And of course it's important, but it's not urgent at the minute. I think about COVID topics in your area. What's the pain, and what's a few practical strategies you could offer around that, and try and bring as many examples in as possible. And a nice clickbaity heading for that, something that'll really kind of grab people's attention. You might just promote it on LinkedIn. I always promote my webinars there, and they get a good source of responses to that. But I think just go out on a limb. Look, the first one, no one's going to know that there was only a dozen people came along. It doesn't matter. But you've
done the first one. Yeah,
that's right.
You've got that first one.
Yeah. And Zoom makes it, the Zoom training materials, do a webinar run by Zoom about how to run webinars. They're fantastic. They're really excellent, and YouTube is just bursting with how-to stuff on all of that now as well.
Yeah, there's so many resources. So we'll put a link to a few of those links in the show notes for this one. And finally, Ken, if people would love to connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so my LinkedIn, Ken Burgin, Burgin. Let's connect that way. And my blog is kenburgin.com.au.
We'll put those in the show notes. Curator Ken. It's been amazing getting to chat to you a bit more and hearing about the system.
Really enjoyed it, yeah.
And your story and how you've sort of built this up. And I mean, it's like everything you've done in your past is sort of set for this moment in time and helping people out. So,
I guess so, yeah. Satisfying.
It is. Thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Hey, thanks so much for sticking around. You've reached the end of another episode of the First Time Facilitator podcast. Connect with the show at firsttimefacilitator.com or follow me on Instagram at Leanne Hughes to find out what I'm up to during the week. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with someone who will also appreciate the insight, and make it easier for yourself and subscribe to the show in your podcast player of choice. Thank you so much for listening, and chat to you next week.